is a crime. You know, I grew up with comic books of the Bhagavad Gita and, well, not entirely the Bhagavad Gita, but the Ramayana and other myth cycles, which are considered literal truth by a number of people in India, a number of groups. And the comic books I meant to bring to show that off are just fantastic, but it's like an intro into history, and it's great. It's wonderful. I come from the very passionate living version.
Excellent. So, kind of springboarding off all of that, let's, Anita, we'll start with you as kind of work our way down. But let's just take a moment and talk about a particular element of a different mythology belief system that has played heavily into one of your stories. Just one good example.
Not so much stories, I guess. Okay, so I can pick on something different here. Costumes. A lot of people here have seen me in costumes where I have antlers. And I frequently get told, well, female deers don't have antlers. That's not what this is from, but it's a mythos that most people here would not be familiar with, but it matters to me. And it is based in part a combination of Scandinavian and Chinese mythology for why I wear the antlers. So, this is my own personal thing, but in certain Chinese, Japanese, and Korean mythology, you will have celestial deer, and the antlers have what looks like starbursts in artwork at the end, and that is a point where they are transcending into the next reality. And that is a sign of wisdom. In Native American mythos, for some of the groups, mostly, I couldn't give you the exact tribes, there's a similar thing of the antlers developing as an individual is developing wisdom. So it parallels the Chinese and Asiatic mythos of antlers being a type of transcendent and reaching beyond oneself into the next reality. There's a Scandinavian mythos, and I'm trying to tie a little more into that with my research because I'm Dutch-Irish and I don't know much about my past. I'm adopted. So that one has a variation on the celestial cow that was used for creation, but it's a reindeer and it's female, and it has to keep the antlers. So those are the tie-ins for why I have the antlers. The rest of that costume relates in some ways to Mother Earth and Herne the Hunter. And so I have all of these things as an amalgamation for personal expression. But that's how it figures into me, and it's a mythos that people here probably wouldn't be familiar with.
Excellent. Thank you. Mike?
Well, in my own fiction, I don't tend to use real world mythology. I prefer to. I mean, there's probably borrowed parts down under the base, but I prefer to kind of work it from the ground up. Now, as a publisher, on the other hand, I'm often very intrigued when I see stories that are working in that are working in religious cultural traditions that are not directly familiar to me, and what comes out of that can be just wonderful. As just one example, in Clockwork Phoenix 5, there's a novelette called Social Visiting, by a relatively new writer named Sunil Patel, and it has on the surface kind of the feel of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in the sense of a young girl, finding enchanted object that leads to other realm, except Sunil is writing out of his own experience as a member of a family from India that immigrated to the United States, and the magical elements come from Hindu culture, and kind of a wry twist in kind of a wry twist, that the young girl is the daughter. The young girl is the daughter of a couple that owns a motel, and they have relatives and friends who own motels. And what our protagonist doesn't know at the very beginning is that all of these motel owners are, to some degree gifted with magic, with the ability to cast spells, and the villain of the Ramayana, I'm afraid his name is escaping my Alzheimer's afflicted brain at the moment, is due to come back, and she discovers through objects like a cereal box and a commercial dryer as opposed to a wardrobe, that these magical things are happening and that she's going to have a role to play in it, and and it's just wonderful, and it's just wonderful. It has a completely fresh feel. And so I'm very happy to be showcasing that kind of story. And that's just one example. There's many, but I'll throw that out for starters.
Thank you. Allegra.
I guess also drawing off of a costuming perspective, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the increased popularity of steampunk is that it allows for people to sort of do their own spin on their characters. With traditional, costume cosplay, you're trying to recreate an existing character. With steampunk, everybody's just making up their own thing, right? So, you can make up your character and where they came from, and what kind of outfit they're wearing. And one of the really neat things that I've seen come out of that is the usage of like fashion styles and I guess like clothing from other cultures. So you'll have people who, who are of Indian descent doing like Indian steampunk. It uses like a sari, and they make a lot of like crazy jewelry out of gears and stuff. I've seen people do Chinese steampunk, and I think that's really fascinating. Like watching people sort of give their own spin on it, because traditionally people think steampunk and they immediately go Victorian. They go like Victorian England, but it stands to reason if it's steampunk there, it's steampunk everywhere else. So there's a lot of room for
one of the first steampunk examples is Nemo, because Captain Nemo was from Pakistan. So it's like, okay, why wouldn't you have someone in traditional Indian attire going steampunk? What was the Nautilus? It's gorgeous. So yeah, it's like, yes, bring it.
Some of the first automatons and things that are
Persian.
very much associated with steampunk or Persian and Chinese. The first water clocks are Chinese. I mean, there's a lot of things that were already there in the culture that, were part of
The first trip to the moon that I know of that was documented is from Chinese literature. And it involved a couple that created a rocket that they traveled to the moon in. And of course they discovered that it was too cold and they couldn't breathe the air. And so they came back. And that's the first time anyone ever said, wait, we have a reason that we can't breathe somewhere? So,
Allegra, did you have anything to finish up with?
That was great timing. But yeah.
So for me, my experience largely centers with, in these books, because in the Unnaturalist, I have two cultures. One is a Victorian culture that has basically forced their